Welcome, guys, back to the I Love Wrestling podcast. I'm your host, as always, Justin Woolwine. Today we are welcomed with Mr. CK. How we doing, man?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's a blessing. I'm excited to have you here. Like I said, two young guns that you trained, Alienated Youth, told me to get you on the podcast, and we are here. I'm excited. I'm ready to roll.
Yeah, Alienated Youth, Skull and Bones here on the shirt there. Uh, Homegrown talent. What's funny is that I actually went to high school with Martian Webb's parents.
That's funny.
Yeah, yeah. I
That's great.
did not even realize it until he told me his dad's name, and I'm like, did he go to Central Catholic? And he's like, yeah, he did. I was like, oh my god. I'm like, dude, it's just, I don't have any. I have a dog. I don't have any kids, so it's like, oh man, are we allowed? Well, I should have asked you this. Are we allowed to curse on here?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, just because like I said, I'm in the wrestling business and the bar business.
Hey,
So
I appreciate it. Before we get started with your wrestling career and what you're doing now in wrestling, do you want to plug any social medias, maybe Skull and Bones, things like that, just to let the fans know where they can keep up with you and the things you're associated with?
sure, yeah. Skull and Bones on Facebook. I believe we have an Instagram. Um,
Yes.
I don't handle that. A couple of guys do, but look for us on look for us on. I don't. We don't have a Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it, but yeah, and, definitely on Instagram and on Facebook.
Sounds good. Since we brought up Skull and Bones, I'll start there. Just go ahead and just tell us a little about Skull and Bones, how you got acclimated with it, and things like that.
Well, I used to, me and Rhino were for about 10 years, we were kind of attached at the hip. I mean, we wrestled in the same places. We traveled to the same places. We got booked together a lot, mostly adversarially, but we were actually a tag team in the UK with our third being one Mr. Corey Graves. He was Sterling James Keenan back then. But man, that was for like one PW. I want to say that was like 2014 or 15. But
Okay.
anyway, I used to do seminars with Rhino, and I would get in there and I would start, there'd be a lot of guys. So to help things move along, I would get in there and I would be locking up with guys. And, I would get in there and show them how to do this or that. And Rhino was always like, man, he's like, you make a great coach, And I trained some guys, like Trey Miguel. I had a hand in training him. I'm the one who got him started. So I kind of, and I got injured. I suffered a really devastating injury. I was wrestling for American Combat Wrestling in Florida. And long story short, a guy did something he wasn't supposed to, came off the top of a cage doing something I specifically told him not to do, especially at his weight of 260 pounds. Ended up landing on my hip and pelvis and shattering. Like my leg was turned all the way around. Like my femur shot through my hip and pelvis. Um, they told me about 12 inches higher, I'd be a quadriplegic. Any higher than that, they said we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I knew, like, after that, I thought I was done. I mean, I thought, my wrestling career is pretty much over. Um, I did come back from that, came back pretty strong actually. But in that time, I was walking with a cane, but I was starting to get a little more mobile. I just said, well, hell, if I can't do the in ring on a daily, on a weekly basis, maybe I can start a school. Maybe we can run with it. And first one to jump on board was Trey Miguel. He was all right. No, he was already with Impact, but he was like, hey man, he goes, if you're serious about the school thing, like I want to be a part of this. And he stuck to it. Nowadays he's a little more busy.
Yeah.
But he's still in there when he can. He trains. He was just there last week with Alex Shelley. They both train up at Skull and Bones.
That's phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to put like it in words, what's kind of like the mission statement for Skull and Bones?
Uh, well, our catchphrase is, or the one I use, our hashtag is "Be Your Idol." Um, we want what we do is we're big on story, right? We're big on telling a story.
Yes.
Okay, this is probably pretty long-winded for a mission statement, but um, like for example, when you start training with us, yeah, we show you how to do the basics, right? I always compare it to a video game, right? Like if you're a wrestling fan, you played like some sort of career mode on a video game. You don't start off with the coolest shit, right?
No.
It takes time to earn that, right? Treat it like a video game, man. It's like when you start off, I'm teaching you just enough to get through a match, but I'm also telling you why you're doing this here, right? Why it would make sense in a story. And then once you get more advanced, then we break that off. Then we start splitting it up, right? You've got the basic methodology of a match, which is shine, cut off, heat, come back, go home. That's the ground floor. Now we can build up on that. Now we can add in double downs. Now we can add in falsies. Now we can it can go a million different ways, right? And tag teams are based off that same methodology too. So I'm giving you the ground floor, right? When you first learn. Now once you get past that and you can tell a story in a match using just the basic stuff, now we advance you up. Now you can start learning some of that cooler stuff you want to learn, within reason. You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
something doesn't make sense, I'll tell you it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
If something looks bad, or I'll tell you it looks bad, or if it looks dangerous, I'll put the kibosh on that. Safety's first, right? I explained to the guys that you're going to get banged up, you're going to get hit, you know. Please don't come to me every time you're sore from hitting the ropes. There's it hurts one thing, injured is another. You're going to be hurt. Get used to being hurt. You're going to be hurt. No way around it. So, but getting back to like the overall theme of our school, I'm heavy on telling a story. Make it make sense. Don't just do moves to do moves. It's one of my biggest pet peeves in wrestling.
Gotcha. So if somebody, a fan or an ordinary person off the street wants to become a professional wrestler, how would they go about getting started with Skull and Bones? Like, where's that process begin?
Well, so I'm kind of sensitive to uh, people's financial well-being. You know what I
Okay.
mean? A lot of people who do this, they start young. I graduated. I promised my folks I would graduate college first, so I was 23 and I was considered late in the game back then. Nowadays, it's not like that. You got guys starting in their 30s and being pretty successful. Because there's more avenues to work, right? It's not you can make money a little bit more nowadays than because it's not just WWE, WCW, or WWE TNA. Now you've got you can do pretty well with GCW. You can make money there. You know what I mean? Enough to make
Yeah.
it worth it. I kind of trailed off there. What was the original question?
How do
Oh,
they?
how to get involved. I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yes, sir.
Yeah. So getting again, I tend to stray off, so I apologize immediately.
It's all
But
right.
no, what we do is so like we host what's called a boot camp, right? What that is it's like $50, and we basically put you through what the first week of training is going to be like because we do like the first 2 weeks are a lot of drills, a lot of cardio, learning how to hit the ropes, taking a flat back bump, things like that. um, I do that because I don't want anybody to and we don't even ask for the full thing up front. It's we're pretty reasonable compared to other wrestling schools. Our tuition's $2,000. I ask for 500 up front and then 100 after each month. If you want to pay it all up front, that's fine. But I'm sensitive to that. Like, so I don't want anybody plunking down a bunch of money, even if it's 500, and then being a week in and being like, I hate this. Right. So we do these boot camps that cost $50. If you do the boot camp and you're like, I'm in, when the next class, I'm in, sweet. That $50 just goes towards your down payment. If you do it and you're like, nah, I think I'd rather be a fan. Um, well, at least you're only out $50 as opposed to 500 or 2,000. But they're a lot of fun. Even people who didn't pursue training, I've seen it, the IWR shows and that, and they're like, yeah, man, they're like, that was a good time. Like, it was fun, just not for me. Like, it was worth trying it, you know? So, either way, I think you'll come out of it you'll definitely have a respect for the pro wrestling business, and you'll have fun doing it. I mean, even though it was, Crimson, I was this dark, crazy looking, basically Batman, Nolan Batman villain, I should say. I'm pretty, anybody who's gone through one of these boot camps, I'm a pretty easygoing guy, it's funny is that the heater, as I call him, of our school, he's the one who will most likely to yell and scream at you. His wrestling gimmick was the world's most huggable wrestler, Brian Castle. So it's kind of a yin and a yang there. But getting back to the school, yeah, I mean, the hardest part about pro wrestling is just getting through the door. I mean, I used to give talks. A guy who this is dating me a bit. A guy who used to do my promotional DVDs, I would send out to get booked. He would do them for free, but he had a friend of his who taught some class at some high school, and I would come in and give a talk. That was like the trade-off. But the basis of the talk was always the same. It was like, whether or not you want to be a pro wrestler, you want to be an actor, you want to be this, that, doctor, lawyer, whatever. Never be the guy that says, I wish I would have. Because uh, that sucks. I mean, going through life, I couldn't imagine that. I couldn't imagine my life if I wouldn't have at least tried. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
encourage everybody who wants to get in it, just get through the door. That's the hardest part. And if you don't, and if you don't make it, you don't make it. But at least you tried. At least you know. So that's my basic advice for anybody who's wondering about getting into the school. Just get through that door, man. That's the toughest part.
Okay. What does it mean for you to be able to train the future?
Uh, like I said, I don't have kids, right? So that's my legacy. Um, I love watching Trey doing his thing, and Jason Hotch, and Sam Beal. They're tearing it up right now. And then you got guys coming up like Alienated Youth. I'm super excited about their future. We got another kid named Himbro Connor Knox. He actually wrestles. He's part of does a little bit of a
Exodus?
different gimmick there. NWA Exodus. Yeah, they're high on him there. And he barely knew anything about wrestling. That kid wasn't even like a wrestling fan. Like barely knew him. Like I mentioned something about Bret Hart one time, and he called him. He brought him up later. He goes, "Oh, that one guy, Bert the Assassin." And I was dumbfounded. I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And he's like, "That guy from Canada." I go, "Do you mean Bret the Hitman Hart?" Yeah, him. I'm like, "Oh my god!" That's when I first started. But that's how he started. He's a super athletic kid who's just like basically he was like an idiot savant, which is kind of the character he's playing now. But he's become like a true student of the game. You know what I mean? Like, even he's only like 20 years old, and he's got a bright future ahead of him. So does Alienated Youth. But this kid Connor Knox, out of nowhere, going from when he first started training, right, not really even sure what wrestling was, to like I'll catch him trying a spot and I'll be like, where'd you see that? Oh, I saw that from the Midnight Express versus the Young Pistols from, Clash of the Champions or something. And I'm like, bravo.
Okay.
Like there we
Impressive.
go. That's my boy. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that's what it means to me. I love watching these guys evolve. I love watching them come up. I love helping with, not only in the ring, but dude, we got a guy named the Kenny Urban, who's one of ours, and doing his promos. Oh my God. Like promo day is my favorite day because I just love coming up, helping these guys come up with stuff. And when they nail it, you're like, oh, perfect. Cause that's a big part of the game, talk them into the seats. I used to say as Crimson, my promo was my high spot.
Okay.
After that, it was pretty much downhill. A lot of horse shit and trickery after that.
That's hilarious. We talked about like how much you love them getting involved with wrestling.
Mhm.
But when did you find wrestling and what made you fall in love with it?
Oh God. The first time I saw pro wrestling, I was about 4 years old. Um, and I'm an old chunk of coal. I'm 48 now, but I remember it was Ricky Steamboat. I was at my buddy's house and his dad had it on. It's pre the Dragons. He had the white trunks, the white boots, and he did a crossbody. And I was like, that's the coolest shit I've ever seen. So immediately He-Man figures became wrestling figure. You know what I mean? I I never stopped watching.
Okay.
Never. I never took a break from watching, even when it was the hokiest shit on the face of the earth. With you had plumbers, you had all this stuff. There was still great wrestling. There was still great wrestling in there. You know, so I never stopped watching. I watched as much as I could. Like I found wrestling, whether it was Wrestling Challenge on, and Wrestling Superstars on Saturday and Sunday mornings. Then it would be Saturday on TBS 6:05 watching NWA WCW. Then after school, I was watching ESPN. I'm catching, either World Class or AWA, and then at midnight we had the local Bruiser Bedlam with, Great Wojo and Dr. Jerry Graham. And that's where Scott Steiner started. Actually, that's why I first saw him. He was Scott Rex Steiner
That's crazy.
when he first started off in Toledo. Yeah. Used to
That's
do a
amazing.
his finisher was a 450 splash.
I was just watching I think it was Steiner on Chris Van Fleet, and he was saying that that's where he invented the 450 was there. So it's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. It's the damnedest thing I've ever seen. Yeah. But so I never stopped watching. And then, like I said, there was a local wrestling school in Toledo. Because that's what you asked, right? It was like kind of how I got into it.
Well, yeah, what got you into it? What made you fall in love with it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, as a kid, I was like everybody else. I was a Hulkamaniac. But I also like as much as I loved Hulk Hogan, I loved to hate Roddy Piper, and that was like magic to me, right? It's like when you're a kid, like superheroes, right? I'm a big Batman mark too. You got Batman, you got to have the Joker.
You have to.
You gotta, it's not the same without it, So I mean, pro wrestling was the same way for me. More so because I was way more into pro wrestling than I ever was like superheroes or comic books. But I mean, it was real life heroes, and the thing is too, and I'm taking this from a documentary I watched once on pro wrestling, but it's true. So if an actor plays a character, right? So Christian Bale played
Batman.
Batman. If I meet Christian Bale, he's Christian Bale. He's not Bruce Wayne. He's not
Exactly.
Batman. But if I meet Ric Flair, I just met Ric fucking Flair.
Yeah.
If I'm meeting Roddy Piper, I'm meeting Roddy fucking Piper, Bret Hart, whoever. That's the person. Yeah, they may not be in character, but that's them. That's what they live. You know what I mean? So to me, it was also, I mean, that's what was so magical about it to me is like, these are real life. This isn't a movie. These are real life people. I can go see them. You know, I can't walk onto the set of a Batman movie, but I can go to the sports arena and I can see, Randy Savage versus Mr. Perfect. You know what I mean? So that was, it was better than anything. Still is.
That's probably been like my favorite part about wrestling my whole life because like we've talked about superheroes. I love superheroes as a kid. I watched Star Wars as a kid. My dad had me watch GI Joe and He Man. So like I watched all those things, but wrestling was the one thing we'd watch on TV, and then you could go to your local. Like I grew up in Charleston, West Virginia, so we'd go
Mhm.
to the Civic Center in Charleston, or they had the Dome in South Charleston, or things like that. We go there and we watch, and then I'd meet them, and it's like okay, like I think one of the first ones that really hit me was I think it was Sabu. I met Sabu as a kid, and that was crazy. Or Zach Gowen, like he was just on TV, and then next thing I know, he's congratulating me on throwing up all over the place. So like it's just really cool to be able to go and meet these people that I mean, most you watch them and you're like, that's a superhero. Hulk Hogan is
Oh,
a superhero, and then you can beat Hulk Hogan is insane. Like it's
yeah,
the only like sport or
whatever you
show
want to
or
call it.
whatever you want to
Right.
call it
Sports
that's like that.
entertainment. Sure.
So I think that's the spectacle of it all. Is it's real in the most like in the best way possible. Because like you
Mhm.
said, Ric Flair's Ric Flair 7 days a week, 365 days a
Yeah.
year. It doesn't change.
Yeah.
And you are CK or Crimson, all day, every day. It doesn't
Well,
change.
that was the beautiful part about Crimson, right? Because it's you know I was never signed to a major company or anything, but I do these shows. I was believable enough, and I would not. I'm like every other indie. I'm selling merch, but when I started selling merch, I would thought, what would Crimson do? So I almost acted like I was being forced to sell merch, right? So I would sit at the table and I would have my hood on. My face is completely covered. You can't see like the bottom half because I walk out and I have a wrapper on my face and a hood. And I stayed in gimmick the entire time. I would just stare off and my fingers, were taped up and they're covered in, the evil red mist. And I'm sitting there just menacingly tapping them, and like everybody else is like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" Whatever. I wouldn't say a word. I would not say a word. Somebody walked up and they were like looking at me, and some of them be laughing, but I still wouldn't break character. And to them, it kind of looked like, and like I wrote, scribbled like Crimson T-shirt, $20 or whatever they were, and it looked messy as shit. So I tried to make it seem like I'm being forced to be there. Like I don't want to do this. So I would just stare, and then somebody in front of me, I'd kind of like break out of the trance and, do you have this shirt? And I'd begrudgingly write size, still wouldn't talk. I'd always have a Sharpie with me. And then large, and then I'd hand it to them. They'd hand me the money. That was it. Can I get a picture? I would just nod, get up, do my pose, and I'd sit my ass back down. I didn't say a word, but my body language was telling them I am not happy to be here. Right. And it worked. I mean, it worked. I mean, and then people bought it. I mean, they'd be like, every other fucking person out here is, hey, how are you? I've got this for sale. I got 8x10s. And I'm the only, and they've got like a setup. Some of them have backdrops. I'm just sitting there with a piece of paper wrinkled up with scribbled Crimson T-shirts on it. You know what I mean? So it's like, now whether or not the crowd, the people who are coming out there thought that, specifically like, oh, he's being forced out here. If nothing else, they were like, something's off about this here. Like something's off about this dude. Like I think he believes his gimmick too much.
do
Now,
do you?
go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say, do you think that's a lost art?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I mean, like, do I love it any less? No. But I mean, yeah, the genie's totally out of the bottle. Um, but I think now matches in particular, I'm not talking storylines, I'm just talking matches in general, wrestler A versus wrestler B. I think it's almost seen as like, and I'm not saying this is a knock, like figure skating, like the performance of the two together, how they collaborate.
It's too much of a
Uh,
dance.
yeah, that's how I think they kind of see it now. You
Okay.
know what I mean? Like, I don't even have to be invested in the storyline, but if they
If they
now,
do enough,
yeah,
we'll pay
now
attention.
me, I'm an old school fan. So I like the story. I want the story. What you can do in the ring, that's great. But and I'm not knocking guys who come together and have an awesome match with no story or anything. They just killed it. That's awesome too. But for me, it's the story that really drives the car. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely, definitely. And when done right, I think some things that are really cool is like, let me think if I can make an example. Like matches that maybe like outside of the ring, the story isn't super compelling, but when they get in the ring, they're able to tell an excellent story. Like
Yeah.
I think one that sticks out like recently, I guess, would be like Cody Rhodes versus AJ Styles at Backlash last year. Like I don't
Mhm.
know if the story necessarily building up to that was great, but the match was excellent, and they didn't do a lot. Like they wrestled, and like
Yeah.
there was a couple of high spots. Like you, they pulled out a burning hammer. Like when was the last time we saw a burning hammer in WWE? Probably
Right.
years. But
Yeah.
like little things like that made it matter so much more. So like I think those are things that are just missing in wrestling nowadays. Is just the making those things matter more.
I do, and that's I kind of have the same problem, and I gotta be careful how I say this because I don't want to.
Yeah.
No, it's just like, well, like death match wrestling.
Okay.
I have I think it's a matter of time before somebody gets really, really badly hurt,
It
unfortunately.
is.
I've dabbled into it. I've wrestled in broken glass. I have no problem, wrestling with thumbtacks, barbed wires, usually where I draw the line. Don't like fire. It's too unpredictable. Light tubes, you can get slashed from anywhere. They're dangerous objects, and um, plus, and I'm not even against it. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that a lot of the shows I see, it's just wrestler A versus wrestler B have a death match. Why? what?
Why
What?
why are we fighting
Why
this
are we doing this?
brutal?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know what I mean. Like, why? Why am I trying to kill this guy? Now, if you give me a reason, and tell a story about behind that, okay, I'm on board. I just think it's it's like anything else. It's not just death match. I mean, some of the moves these guys do, I it's not so much they're unbelievable, but some of them just to me just don't make sense. Like, I'm not a fan of the buckshot lariat.
Okay.
It's because the fella does the front flip, lands on his feet, and then dives into a lariat. It's like you stop your momentum. You when you flipped, you landed on your feet. That stop. If you could just flip, tuck into a lariat, well, now that's something.
That'd be
But
impressive.
yeah, but you're stopping your momentum. You know what I mean? And to
Okay.
me, it's just
Yeah.
like it's unnecessary. Why am I doing this flip?
Okay.
Why don't I just
I,
hit a badass lariat?
I like how you think. Like I've never thought of it that way. Just
Yeah,
maybe those are the little things I'm missing out of wrestling now that I'll probably pay attention to. Because that makes sense. Like why? I mean, if the whole point is for me to hit this maneuver, why am I going to stop my momentum to hit said maneuver?
yeah.
Okay.
Kevin Nash tells a great story where when he first started wrestling, um, he did uh, I think it was like a leapfrog and a sunset flip.
Okay.
Yeah, it was against that's right. It was against Bob Backlund, and Shawn Michaels pulled him aside after the match because I guess Backlund called it or whatever. And he goes, "Let me get this straight." He said, "You're the biggest guy in the company, and you're avoiding contact." And Nash kind of thought about it for a second, and Sean looked at him and said, "You're athletic. That's great. Now draw money." Said after that, he barely left his feet.
Which
He
makes
didn't
sense.
bump unless he had to. Yeah, because it's like that, and you see that a lot too. As a guy's trying these, bigger guys trying to, like a 7 foot guy doing like a backflip or something. It's like you're athletic, awesome, but now you're just a bigger version of the rest of the pile. Like I'd rather see you work that size. Maybe pull that off once a year.
Yeah.
You know,
Like, I mean, a good example would be like Brock pulling out a 450 or the shooting star press every once in a while just to make
so we
it
can do it.
a
Yeah,
surprise.
make it
But
special.
that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so
If you what's your what's like your favorite food on the face of the earth?
steak. We'll throw steak out there.
All right. So what if you ate steak 3 times a day, every day, 7 days a week?
You're gonna get tired
You're
of it.
gonna get sick of it, and it's not special anymore, right? If you have a
Okay.
steak like once a month or twice a month, you're looking forward to that steak.
You're
Oh man,
excited.
right? So if I'm a wrestler and I can do that, save that for when it means more. Don't do it. Don't waste it on every match.
Okay.
You know.
Do you think that could be like also put into like, let's say somebody uses their finish? Do you think that should be something that's saved for the end of the match?
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I do.
Okay.
That's just the way it every once in a while. Like I can see it from both sides. Um,
Got you.
like we'll use the recent Cody Rhodes John Cena thing, right? Where they had
Hmm.
their in ring and then Rhodes laid him out.
Yep.
That should not have happened.
Okay.
Like,
Why?
well, they shouldn't touch, right? You've
Okay.
given that away,
That's been
and
my argument with my dad. I'm not
yeah,
gonna lie.
and Cena was out. Cena was out.
Hmm.
Okay, so now
Where do we go from here?
I've seen, I've seen 10 other guys kick out of that on the roster, and the great John Cena is now unconscious from the crossroads. I've seen him hit it on guys and they kick out at 2.5. So uh, and like I said, if it progresses the story, I'm not totally against that. It just has to make sense. But in terms of that promo, no. If you were going to do anything, if they shouldn't even have touched, in my opinion. But if they were going to, after Cena threw that strike, hook him up for the crossroads, Cena get out the back door, crawl out of the ring, tease it, but don't give it to him. That's my opinion, but you know, because you just kind of wasted it. It's not
Yeah.
like they won't. It's not like they won't come back from it. It's not like they're now Mania's not going to draw. No, but in my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of other old school like kind of '80s purists, that's just my opinion.
Okay. Something like in doing research that interested me, and it's one of those kind of like a personal thing because like I grew up. I mentioned watching wrestling in West Virginia. In West Virginia, we had IWA East Coast, but
Mhm.
you was a big part of IWA Mid South,
Yeah.
and the time you was in there was the time when all the greats that we now watch were there. So what was it like for you to try to sink your teeth uh, into IWA Mid South back in the day?
So IWA Mid South was like the craziest freaking thing on the face of the earth. Because it was like one of those. I don't know if it was the only place, but it was definitely a place that was a jump off point to Ring of Honor.
Hmm.
Um, at that point, I had some friends in Ring of Honor like Alex Shelley and Jimmy Jacobs. Alex Shelley's the one who actually recommended me to Ian for IWA Mid South.
Okay.
Um, so, but it's so funny though because I watched those matches back now. I mean, so like wrestling will go through its like
Faces.
it's certain trends in wrestling, right?
Yeah.
So when I started the early 2000s, chain wrestling and head drops were on the menu. So, every match I look back, like a few I've cared to even watch back, but it's like I'm doing, there's like so much chain wrestling. And then it's like small heat, and then it's head drop, 1, 2, head drop, 1, 2. And I'm watching myself and I'm like, and I'm exhausted in the match. I'm like, well, no shit. Now looking back all these years, I'm like, well, no shit, you're exhausted. You're constantly picking up this 200-pound guy and flinging him around. You know what I mean? And then you're posting for the next thing. So I mean, that was the time, that was the style. I won't say it's gone away, but it's changed. I mean, you don't have nearly as much of that anymore. There's like usually if there's chain at all, it's a quick trade off and something cool. Let's get to the spot. But IWA, it was cool there. That's when like Hero was there, Punk was there, Cabana, Chad Collier was there, Nigel, Austin Aries.
BJ Whitmer was there.
Yeah, BJ was there. Obviously Jimmy Jacobs, Alex Shelley, Petey Williams, because that's who I would travel a lot. I've known Petey before he was the Canadian Destroyer.
That's great. He was my
Yeah.
favorite in TNA when I was a kid. I know everybody hated him, but the Canadian Destroyer was like my favorite move as a kid, and he's the only guy that did it.
Yeah. So when I first started, I got in, like I started training at a school in Toledo that was absolute, no offense to the guys, but it was absolute garbage. It was like a list of moves. It was everything my school's not. It was just a list of moves you learned. There was no psychology, nothing.
Okay.
So I was already wrestling. Like I was doing indie shows. I come from like a radio background, and I did a little bit of acting and stuff like that. So I was not afraid to talk in front of a crowd. So I would try and get over with a promo, but I knew my wrestling was dog shit. I knew I had to get better. And that's where I met this kid named Patrick Martin, who was just kind of starting off setting up rings. And then we started kind of training, and he had a bunch of these tapes and stuff. He'd lend me this tape from Japan, and I'd give him that back, and then he'd lend me stuff from, the UK, and I'm seeing all this. I'm like, this stuff is crazy, man. Like, this is awesome. And then Patrick got picked up by Scott D'Amore, saw him on a show, Wrestle Briar Wellington, and saw that this kid was special, brought him over to Border City Wrestling, or the K&M Dojo. My dog's interrupting me. Go lay down. Sorry. And that kid was Alex Shelley. And then Shelley went over there. I asked if I could come train. This is getting to PD in a minute. Think Scott D'Amore would let me come up and train. He's like, yeah, let me ask. So I showed up, and I showed up again, and then PD, the head trainer then was Joe Legend. Had a hand in training me, John Bolin, Petey Williams, Alex Shelley, Chris Sabin, all those guys. And he was the head trainer, and Petey was like the assistant trainer. And I'd seen Petey on indie shows, but I didn't really know him. And they were just like, just keep showing up. And I'm like, yeah, but I like, Scott didn't say it was okay. And they're like, just keep showing up. Stop asking, just keep showing up. I'm like, but shouldn't I ask? Just shut up and keep showing up. So I kept just showing up to training, and Scott would come in with his Tim Hortons, and he's sitting there and just kind of like, oh, this guy's back again. And then he got in the ring with me and beat the hell out of me a few times. And about 3 months into training there, he started using me on shows with a wrestler named Ruffy Silverstein, and we became the High Class Cripplers. And we used to feud with Petey and Bobby Roode, because they were baby faces in Canada. Yeah. So me and Ruffy, as the High Class Cripplers, first Bobby and Petey as the babies. But Petey was always a good wrestler, but it was crazy how he first got noticed. I don't know if you know that story. I think he had wrestled for an explosion match for TNA. Okay. About 15 minutes. It was a three-way dance. It was Jerry Lynn, Juventud Guerrero, and Teddy Hart. About 15 minutes before the match, Teddy Hart somehow blew his knee out. I don't know. Now they're scrambling. Scott grabs Petey. Hey, I need you in this match. It's a three-way with Juventud Guerrero and Jerry Lynn. We're going on in 10 minutes. First time this guy's on, like, it was on, I think it was on TNN when that was going on. So this guy's on national TV, right? First time, wrestled just an explosion match, whatever. Those were for like the internet or whatever it was. And this guy's been basically just thrown into this. And the match was off the charts. It was so good. Like Petey just nailed it. And that's when they brought him into Team Canada, because Team Canada was already established. It was like started with like Ted Hart, Jack Evans, and somebody else. I think it was Eric Young. That was the original Team Canada. So. Yeah, but that's how Petey got to TNA. I remember calling him like after I saw it, and I was like, "Oh my god, dude!" But I still make fun of Petey to this day. I saw him actually backstage at the Maple Leaf Pro show in October. Because Petey Williams is the worst. Every location in the United States is 3.5 hours away. Everyone. He would call me. Now, this is back when we had to look at maps. We didn't have the magic phones I'm talking to you on now. He would call me and be like, "Hey, CK, so this on the 15th, Ian wants to know if you're booked." Because Petey was like the world champion at the time. And I was like, "No, I can make it." Okay, cool. Yeah, the deal is it's in Ulitic, Indiana. All right, in Indiana, it's kind of by Ohio. Sure, let's see. Yeah, Petey, I'm looking at this. This is like 10 hours away. Nah, it's like 3.5, maybe. It's like 3.5, more like. Petey, I'm looking at the map. I'm on my map quest here on my plug-in internet, and it's telling me it's 10 hours. Nah, it's more like 3.5. Every place was 3.5 hours. So it'd be like, and Ian, God bless him, wasn't the best payoff guy. So, you're driving that, and you're lucky if you got $50, no gas money. So you probably cost you more. But the good trade-off to that is when we were in Japan. Scott D'Amore sent first two we sent were Petey Williams and Chris Sabin for this company. It was called like WrestleAid Project, and Joe Legend was the champion there. And then the next two he sent were me and Alex Shelley. And Alex Shelley was already wrestling in 0-1. He'd been a mainstay. He was already with Ring of Honor. Like, he was well known. But we just got into or was it? Was Shibuya? Yeah, we were in Japan anyway. It was Shibuya. It was the Shibuya Hotel, and there was like wrestling fans outside. So Legend goes out, he's signing stuff, and he walks in. He's like, "Hey," he's like, "Patrick, they want you out there." So Shelley goes outside, he signs, and I'm like, I wasn't, I think I was still doing like dark matches for Ring of Honor. Hold on one second, Jango, go lay down. Doing a podcast, you nut. Anyway, but Shelley came in and he goes, "CK," he goes, "They like, well, I don't think he called me CK, he called me Justin, but he's like, they want you to sign." And I'm like you're in 0-1. Joe Legend has done numerous tours of Japan. Like, why? Like, what? And he goes, "Dude," he goes, "they collect a lot of IWA Midsouth." And I'm like, "Oh, perfect." Like, so wasn't a lot of people out there. I'm not going to lie to you, but there was probably like three guys out there hanging out wanting to get something signed. But I mean, they were tape traders, right? So they got stuff. So they're getting these shows with 60 people in them from Ulitic, Indiana. where we're wrestling. So I mean, that was, so it was worth it. I mean, yeah. So I actually wrestled Danny Daniels on Punk's last match with IWR Midsouth. Last match.
That's great.
Yeah, it was him and Delirious wrestled for an hour.
Did they go all 60 minutes?
Oh yeah, and then
Yeah.
Ian impromptu cut a 45-minute promo wishing Punk well afterwards, and then they had a War Games elimination cage match that
Just
also
impromptu.
lasted an hour. I didn't get home till about 8 a.m.
Gosh.
Yeah, it was about 5 hours. I live in Toledo, Ohio, so it was about 5 hours. So yeah, I don't think the show ended till about 3.
It's funny because I remember as a kid, like going to IWA East Coast shows, which were ran by, I believe, by Pondo.
Mm-hmm.
If
I
I'm
love that
correct,
guy.
I love Pondo. Actually, he was my first like actual wrestling guest on the podcast
Oh
ever.
really?
Shout out to Pondo.
He's a
Uh,
super cool dude, man.
I'm gonna have to. He's in a tour of Japan right now, and he was like, I think it's his 50th tour. And
Oh,
nobody,
probably.
he's like, nobody's ever done 50 tours. He's like the first guy to ever do 50 tours of Japan. So like, hopefully I can get him back on. Uh,
Dude,
but
so real quick, I got a great Pondo story, and it's super quick.
okay,
So
bet.
I'm wrestling Pondo as Crimson for the Clowns for ICP, right? We're in like Royal Oak, Michigan or something. And I used to be on tour with the Clowns, not as Crimson, but as Conrad Kennedy. And their fans are a bit much sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, so we're fighting through the crowd, right? And it's like it's JCW, so we're hitting each other with shit. And I'm getting pelted with drinks. I got hit with like three, well, not three. I got hit with one. After that, I'm using Pondo as a shield. Like I've got his jersey, and I'm just like trying to deflect it. Pondo shoot, like not elbows me, but kind of like elbowed me off. And he looks at the crowd and he goes, "Motherfuckers, y'all hitting me, and I'm the fucking face." And everybody was like, and then they started a "Don't throw shit" chant,
That's great.
which was
That's Pondo though.
oh yeah, oh it was hilarious.
That's
It was so
100%
fucking funny.
Pondo.
Yeah. Anyway, go on. I'm sorry.
Well, like, I remember going back to Ian, like
Mm.
I told you about Zach Gowen seeing me throw up. But it was Pondo and New Jack in some crazy like I remember the spot New Jack was stabbing Pondo in the forehead with a fork. And I'm like 5, 6 maybe. And it squirts out. And I was like, Dad, I'm gonna throw up. So he's taking me to like the little walkway area, like off to the side and around comes the corners Ian and Zach Gowen. And it was funny because I remember Gowen, he didn't have his leg, like his leg on, he was just hopping. So like
Mm.
he's hopping around the corner, Ian's walking with him, they're just talking. I threw up all over the floor. Like probably the most I've ever thrown up in my life. And without hesitation, Ian thumbs up, it's like that's amazing. And Zach Gowen, the only words that come out of his mouth is that's awesome. And then like Ian's
That's
like, don't worry about it. Like we'll have somebody clean that up. Just go do whatever. And then later, like they all signed my belts. I had tacks from like I think they were in Pondo or New Jack, one of them, like in the old like WWF. Like remember how they had like the foam belts?
yeah, yeah.
I had the tacks in there. It was just like I don't know.
That's
IWA shows were
hilarious.
always so cool, but
leave,
going
leave,
back,
leave it to pro wrestlers, and I'm not knocking it because I would have done the same thing. Leave it to pro wrestlers. Be like, dude, we freaked this kid out so bad. He's throwing up. He's
yes,
projectile vomiting. High five. Bam.
high
We
five
did it.
and go back and watch, kid. It's pretty much, and I did. I went back and continued watching, but like those shows though, like you'd think they're over, like they'd end with the main event of whoever for the title, and then out of nowhere you'd have Ian or Pondo or like Too Tough Tony come out and be like, you know what, we're gonna do this for the fuck of it, just because like you guys are still rowdy, you still want to stay, sure, let's have another match, and then you get another match. And I don't know if I've seen a show like that in years, honestly.
So the I was because I think the first live wrestling show, I was never really I didn't go to many indie shows or anything, but
Mhm.
I went to a bunch of house shows, and that I think the first one I went to, I was in second grade at the old Joe Louis. The main event was Terry Funk versus Junkyard Dog. Um, but um, I'm spacing out again. My God, I'm traveling off now. What were you just saying just a second ago?
Uh, about like shows continuing longer than they were
Oh
supposed to.
yes, okay. That's what I wanted. I'm so sorry, man.
You're all right.
That's what I want to tell you. So, getting back to house shows, one of to this day one of the best shows I've ever seen was a house show for ECW in Toledo, Ohio, at the Seagate Center, which is not a big bill. This is before I started wrestling, probably about a year and a half before I started like training to wrestle. I mean, this is not a huge place. Like I ended up wrestling in the Seagate Center, right? Very early in my career. Um, Not a big place, so it was real intimate. But it would be like I think like the first match was like Chili Willy versus Chris Chetty, and they went for like 4 to 5 minutes, flash pin, boom, and all of a sudden here comes Steve Carino out, and now he confronts Chili Willy. Now they've got something. They beat him down, impromptu match. Bam, Carino hits him with the help of Jack Victory. Now Carino's on the mic. Basically, I told you so. I'm the best. All of a sudden, you got to keep them separated. Here comes Raven out. Now it's another match. Now it's a hardcore match. Everything was just like, it was like almost like episodic in nature. It was like one thing led to another and then it would break, right? So those three matches all led into another. Then I think there was some like three-way dance. Then there was like that, that was just by itself. But then there was another one where it was, I think it was supposed to be um it was Masato Tanaka versus Mike Awesome, but then all of a sudden you start hearing Man in the Box or who was the guy with who was the guy with Awesome? Wasn't
Judge, was it the judge?
no, it
No.
wasn't that guy. It was a heel, but it wasn't one of the ones like you normally would expect to be in like a main event, but whoever it was, shit. I'll just say I don't think this is right, but I'll just say maybe it was Carino back out or something. But it was Mike Awesome, let's say Carino, that broke off. So now here's Carino out there, with Mike Awesome talking shit to Tanaka in his face. All of a sudden, here's Man in the Box. Now it's a tag team match, right? After they've already wrestled, a couple of times, he interferes. Now it breaks down this tag team match. It goes all over the place. I didn't even like. I had seen ECW pay-per-views, but I didn't really know who everybody was. So, and I was, like I said, to this day, it was one of the best shows I've ever seen live because it wasn't just match story, match story, match
Right.
story. Now, if you tell a story within the match, I'm totally okay with that. That's what I grew up on. But it was so unique because it was like watching a 3 hour show. You know what I mean? It was like, wow, you didn't want to look, you didn't want to get up. You didn't know what was going to happen next. That's what I loved about like the old ECW. But that was going to house shows. That's why I was driving at before I went on my little
Do
tirade.
do you do you think like IWA shows were like I don't know, like an extension of ECW?
I think like a lot of other places they tried to be,
Okay.
because it was it was kind of the same format, right? You had
Yes.
really good wrestling, it was, and then you had blood and guts, but I mean a lot of places did the same thing, CZW and all that, which I would argue probably do I don't know about a bigger level, but definitely do a level. But I think they tried to, like a lot of places. I'm not saying they weren't successful, but yeah, I mean, was it ECW? No,
No,
but they definitely went for that.
the
Not
kind
ever
of
being
vibe.
an ECW. Yeah, they were. That's what they were going for. Yeah, because you would see, but they did some clever shit too. I mean, I think the one match, and it was Hero versus Punk. I think they went for like it was like a 90-minute Iron Man match.
90-minute Ironman match. Yep.
And they built that up. You know what I mean? And that was a long build for that. I can only imagine nowadays if they had what we had today, with YouTube and all that. I mean, they could have packed a arena with that if everybody was as accessible to YouTube pay-per-views and like Fight TV and stuff. So
Well, like you gotta think if something like that was to happen today, especially to the caliber that like Punk and Hero did it, that's something like a match like that seen nowadays would probably get you signed instantly. A company would
yeah,
see that right away and be like, "Why
or
aren't
just help
they
build
here?"
the company.
Yes,
Put more asses in seats.
100%.
Um, it's hi buddy. I know my dog Jango.
Making a guest appearance.
There he is. Oh yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, today would be a totally different ball game. I mean, there's certain, and like I'm seeing a lot of stuff that's going on now. Obviously, like, IWR, we're on Fight TV now, which is awesome. Um, so a lot of guys are getting exposure, more exposure than just a normal wrestling show, right? Let's say you get, even if it's something like 20 people, 20 people tuned into that show. Well, that's 20 more people that weren't in the arena.
Yes.
That's 20 more opportunities for somebody to go to their local wrestling promoter and be like, hey man, I saw this guy on Rhino's Insane Wrestling Revolution. You should look at these guys. That's 20 more opportunities. That's 10 more opportunities. That's 5 more opportunities. I don't care if it's one more. That's why when, and I know I sound like a grizzled old vet here or whatever, but I mean, like, that's why when you're doing these shows and you have that the ability to have that many eyes on you, that's why it's got to be, you got to play to win. And I if there's any wrestling guys who are just starting off, out there, who are just starting to do matches, who are listening to this or whatever, my biggest thing to you is never stop training. Never stop training. If you have access to a ring, never stop training. Um, you know, does that mean, especially when you're, 10, 15 years in, you should still do it. I mean, are you going to? No, I didn't always have access to a ring, but when I did, I took advantage of it. That's how I met Trey. A guy I knew was Trey's best friend's dad, and Trey was like 16. And I was going up there to work on some stuff. And Trey was this skinny young kid who just really wanted to learn, you know. Um, but I mean, even if you're doing shows, I always say this. I'm like, so you make it to the NFL, right? You're a football player. You go through high school, you go through college, you make it to the NFL, you sign that contract. Do you think it's, well, see you guys on Sunday, I'm going to go enjoy my money for a week? No, you practice, you train, do it like it's your job. You know, practice, train as much as you can. There's always something to learn. There's always a new hold. There's always something to perfect. You know, learn something new or perfect something every time you step in a ring, or at least try to.
I mean, I think the same principle is something I try to utilize, like with podcasting. Every interview, every conversation is the word I was
Yeah,
looking for. I try to say, okay, these are the things that were done right, and then these are the things maybe I can improve on. Like I like how I asked this question, but maybe I could have asked it this way, or I built it up for this way, but I should have went this way.
yeah,
And so like That being said, like it's something you could utilize not only in wrestling, but podcasting, but in life. I mean, if you just take what you did today and you say, okay, I did all these things right, but what can I do better? Guaranteed to improve on something.
Yeah, I mean the goal. What's the old saying? If you do what you love, you never work a day in your life, right? I
Yes,
mean,
sir.
make that make that be the goal. I mean, I mean, nobody starts off great at anything. I point that out to my students all the time, like because when you start training, you get frustrated at times. Why can't I do this right? What am I not doing right? Or why do I keep doing this? And I'll stop and I'll be like, "Who's your favorite wrestler?" Randy Orton. Randy Orton sucked when he was as far along as you were. Randy Orton sucked when he was first starting off. Everybody sucks. There's very rare guys who just sail through this. Even guys who can get down the basics. There's so much to learn and so much to perfect. I mean, I even look back for I was with Ring of Honor for a cup of coffee. I wish I would have gotten that a couple of years later because I was that much better later because I was more seasoned. I figured out some things better. I learned how to work in my character a little bit more. Um, you know, Same thing with Crimson. When I first started Crimson, I looked like I was doing a Joker cosplay. I mean, it did. It looked ridiculous, and then it just kind of evolved over time to, this monster, that spit, evil, blinding red mist everywhere. Um, uh, I think I still owe the Hart family for their canvas in Calgary. It's a mess because of me.
uh, I'm gonna ask you. I'll ask you one more question,
Yeah.
and then I'll let you go. Um, what is like your relationship like with IWR, Insane Wrestling Revolution, and Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling?
So with the IWR, like I said, me and Rhino is I consider him not only one of my best friends in wrestling, but my best friend in real life. Like
He's a great person. Just want to throw that
he's
out there.
one of the kindest human beings I've ever met in my life. Um, he's helped me tremendously over the years uh, in every aspect. I mean, like I said, it's not like we just traveled together. We were buddies. We hung out, outside of the ring. Whether he's coming down to Toledo, and Rhino doesn't drink, but he would just sometimes come down just to hang out at this bar I ran because we had some characters in there. And but he got along with everybody. You know what I mean? I mean, so and he used to run like church shows sporadically, right? And then when him and Gary put together IWR, it was I think around the same time I started the school. So
Okay.
it was kind of organic, and then it was like him talking to me about what he wants to do, and I was like, well, it didn't happen this fast, but it was pretty fast. Where it was like, well, I got this guy who I think would fit perfect in this. Okay, great. So then it became that now we're working hand in hand, right? So IWR Skull and Bones is basically a feeder system for IWR, right? If we're looking if a guy's doing really good like in training and he's starting to come around and he's got a good character about him and there's something where Rhino's maybe pitching me like, hey, I need a guy for this, and I'll be like, what about this guy? That's how Dutch the Buckeye Sam and them, he had the idea for Buckeye Sam, but Coach Dutch was my doing. So what if we have this guy with him, and then I had the idea to make Coach Dust, with the whistle. I'm a huge Marx Brothers fan. That's a completely Harpo Marx because Dutch has got really good. And he's a good.
Facial.
For being as green as he is, he's actually can work really well in ring. He hasn't really got to show it off yet, but he's got great facial expressions. So at first he was doing promos with Sam, and I'm like, you don't talk. I was like, you speak with this and the whistle. That's it.
Just blow the
And
whistle.
it's so unique. It's awesome, right? I know the crowd gets a kick out. Now he can't get the damn thing out of his mouth. Um, so,
I like
but
how every time he gets hit, the whistle. Like that was
Yeah,
the one thing that stuck out the whole match at the last
yeah,
show. Chop, whistle, punch,
yes.
whistle, kick, whistle.
And here's me on commentary with like a twinkle in my eye because I'm like, he was. I mean, it's not a very desired position, right? He's like half manager, sometimes wrestler, and he's usually the guy who's getting the shit kicked out of him.
Hmm.
So it's not a really like, because everybody wants to be a badass or a champion or something, right? Some even if you want to be,
You'll
you
be the
want,
guy.
yeah. I mean, everybody does. No matter what your character is, that in your mind that could be the guy. So handing him this gimmick and saying, "Hey, this is what we want you to do," and him just taking it and running with it, and like I basically said, no talking, whistle, boom. He does the facial expressions. That's all Dutch. He does I mean, that's his gimmick. I didn't tell him to do that. That's him just thinking outside the box. How can I make this gimmick better? Right. So and that's a lot what we preach at the school, like always, because like when we first began talking, and I'll get back to IWR in a second, but like a lot of guys will work to get that move over. They have that one move, and that one move might look great. But if everything you did up to that move doesn't make sense or looks like shit, you lost me in the first minute. So I always preach, do not work a match to get yourself over. Work to get them, put me in there with the worst guy you got. I will make him look like $1,000,000 because in turn, you will get over. You will get booked. Give me that guy. He can work with anybody. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But that diatribe aside, but we kind of work hand in hand with IWR in that way. Now with Maple Leaf Pro, for years, I've been asking Scott Demore, how do I, get backstage, become an agent, whatever. And he let me sit on a few things like years and years ago. Um, and then when he did the first Maple Leaf Pro show in October, he said, "Hey," he goes, I'm inviting you to be backstage at this. I want to start showing you." He goes, "I didn't, quite frankly, he goes, I didn't have the time at TNA. Now I want you to start learning, how to be an agent." So there, I call myself kind of a producer in training. Like it's baby steps, man.
You're
Um,
learning.
I'm learning. I'm just learning. I'm loving every second of it. But I'm just learning. They got me working under D'Lo Brown, so I'm basically D'Lo's like one of the main guys there as an agent. You got Jimmy and Scott are the producers, obviously the main guys, but D'Lo's a producer, agent, whatever you want to call him. And I'm basically just kind of sitting in with it and just learning. And I love D'Lo Brown, man. He's so knowledgeable, and he knows how to, like, things he was describing where I was like, "Hey D'Lo, what if they did this here?" And he'd be like, "Well," he's like, "Yeah, I see what you're saying, but the problem is the camera wouldn't hit it this way." I'm like, "Oh shit!" Like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm so focused on the in ring. There's a broader picture here. Like mind blown, right? My eyes are opening now. So there's more to think about than just what's happening in the ring. Now we got to get this shot this way, that way. So it's I'm not gonna say it's starting from scratch, but as at Rhino show, I help produce matches, and yeah, they're for TV, but now we're talking about pay-per-views, right? With
Yeah.
with international talent, you got guys from New Japan, AEW, all these huge stars, and it's a different animal. It's a broader thing. Now I can take some of the stuff I learned and apply it, but Rhino's been wrestling on TV for almost his entire career. So that's the other thing about IWR is it kind of helped. It kind of took the shock, not the culture shock, away from LPW or Maple Leaf Pro, because Rhino runs the backstage exactly like a TV show. We got to be done by 9 o'clock. The refs have time cues. We time out the segments. It is very organized. Like it more
I
so.
noticed that when I was sitting there, like there's
Yeah,
somebody counting off. I don't know if anybody else noticed it, but I was something I've become conscious of since becoming a podcaster is just like the little nuances that happen. And that
Yeah.
was one of the things that going really impressed me about Rhino's production was just how, I don't want to say time sensitive it is, but like how it's constructed.
Yeah. It's constructed just like a TV show. I mean, and what we're going to do, and Rhino's smart because Rhino kind of pulled a little bit from that ECW. Almost all of his shows end with some sort of cliffhanger,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's going to make you want to tune into the next one. And guess what? He gets the same people at Plus, but you always see the same faces there. Always see the same faces. So I love IWR. I mean, I get if it's almost coming full circle the interview because talking about seeing my guys now, the guys that I've got there, I'm seeing progress. I'm seeing them work with better talent. From the guys like who've been doing it a while, like Kenny Urban, seeing his goose gimmick get off. Rod Lee, he's one of mine. Sam Beal, Jason Hodge, of course, Trey Miguel. And now I'm seeing the guys like, Sam Al Jahami, the Desert Dragon, or Buckeye Sam as he is. Dutch, Coach Dutch, I believe I think it's Dutch Van Zig is what the other name he uses on the Indy. The Saint Brothers, they've got they're really charismatic and they've got a good stick with the crowd. Seeing these guys start coming, Alienated Youth, my God, right? See, watching them all start to come up and start getting a taste of that, and I'm like, it's a beautiful thing, and it's from when I started Skull and Bones. I want it to be a team. I want it to be like I tell my guys, take everything of mine. Like I want all of you to surpass me 10 times over. I was never signed to a major promotion, but I've traveled the world on someone else's dime. WWE didn't send me. TNA didn't send me. AEW didn't send me. I sold me. I got over on my own. No, I wasn't part of a group. I got over, and even, with even like Hall of Famers, like Bret Hart called me and wanted me to work for his son, Dallas's Dungeon Pro Wrestling in Calgary. I did that for a year. I was like their main villain. Brett's with me, not choreographing, but giving me the bullet points of what his vision is, what he wants. First time they had Aruba or Rep Pro Wrestling in Aruba, excuse me, in 25 years, Kevin Nash called me and he said, and they threw one of my promos on Aruba TV. And I said, hey, how did the promo get over? He said, you're so money. He goes, you're working with me in the main. I got me over, not saying there's anything wrong with getting sent by,
Yeah.
WWE else. But my point is that even though you weren't signed to maybe a major contract, you can still travel the world. You can still, call your guys who, you were heroes, are now your peers. I talk to Bret Hart on a regular basis. He was one of my absolute favorite people. I talked to, me and Kevin. I just saw Kevin on Sunday. Me and Kevin Nash are boys. I got to Roddy Piper was my manager leading me to the ring in my match against Kevin Nash. You want to talk about mind blown,
It's like completely full circle.
Yeah, Nash is when Nash and Razor, man, they got wrestling cool again. When I was in college, I remember when the NWO hit, and I'm like, oh, thank you, God, finally, I don't have to be a closet wrestling fan anymore. This shit's awesome. And now I'm buddies with that guy. A guy I dress up with, or a guy I dressed up with, a guy I dressed up as for Halloween when I was, 21 years old. Now buddies with. Had me wrestle him in Aruba, had me wrestle X-Pac the night before. I mean, it's just, you can still, even though if you don't quote unquote make it, do a major contract or anything, you can still live the dream, man. You just might have to, work a little harder, or
Go a
you
different route.
yeah, and but getting back to MLP, like I said, I'm just a producer in training. I'm having a blast. We got Rhino's WrestleFest, not Rhino's WrestleFest, but IWR's WrestleFest. That's me second and third.
Yep.
That's gonna be a really good one. Got some big names on that. Eric Bischoff, I believe, is the headliner, but I think they're all headliners really. Yeah, Heath and Rhino tagging up. That's worth the price of admission. And then MLP is going to Maple Leaf Gardens May 10th. So I don't know if
Back
I'm
to
going to be.
back.
Yeah. So I'll definitely be at IWR. I don't know if I'll be at Maple Leaf Pro for that one because it's a big undertaking. I don't know if what the budget is, and not like it costs a lot or anything, but they might just be keeping it small for what they want to do. Maybe not. I don't know. I hope to go. Rhino just he was just, I don't know if you saw that, but he's booked
It
for that.
just announced. Yep.
Yeah, so I might just go no matter what. If Rhino, I might just be like, Scotty, I'm not working, man. I'm just tagging along. What did Elo say? Um, but yeah, I mean that's the next goal is to you know gain some position in like the dream was always to make a living in pro wrestling, but now I'd like to do it maybe not in ring, either as a coach or a producer doing both. um, you know and like I said, man, I mean, like I'm listening to Scott and listening to D'Lo and you know he, Jimmy Jacobs, and I'm listening to these guys and I'm like, shit, man, I'm learning stuff. I haven't seen, Bravo, Johnny Bravo is another one for TNA. He's a guy. What
Brilliant.
we were a tag team. We call ourselves the 400 Club because one year we were both we were in the upper 400s. I was CK3, he was Johnny Bravo, and Scott used to have us as a tag team, and we were basically there to make other people look good. Like we were like we were the carpenters. We had to build the houses, right? And so that was kind of our role there, but we had a blast with it. And Johnny's brilliant, man. And here's the funny thing is that even right now, Johnny can outwork probably 90% of the roster. Like Johnny was an incredible in-ring performer. Um, he's not the most, neither am I, but as pleasing to the eye. Like he's not a big jack guy or anything like that. But man, that dude can work, and he's and now when he moved kind of to the producer backstage role, he's learned so much, and you combine what he learned with what he already picked up himself, and his knowledge of the business is just off the charts. Um, I love Bravo to death. But he's another one who I kind of look to, and because he's hands on at IWR, so he often explains to me if I have questions. He's always there to answer them, and he'll tell me which guys he thinks need work on this and what's that, and Johnny's brass tacks, man. He ain't gonna sugarcoat it. He'll tell you what he thinks, and I love that about him. So
Definitely. CK, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us for the podcast.
yeah, no worries.
I'm not gonna lie, if I didn't have a time crunch, I still have like 10 questions I'd love to ask you. So I'm gonna leave the door open. If you want to come back on for a part two,
I
three,
would
whatever,
definitely.
I'd love to have you.
I don't know if anybody's going to listen to this, but I would definitely do it too. I mean, just because I'm on, not because of you. I mean,
No,
DK, who?
no, I'm sure your fans, IWR fans, Maple Leaf
I
fans
hope.
would love to see it. So
Yeah,
if you want to accept the invitation, maybe we can work out a part two.
yeah, absolutely. Anytime. I had a blast. Thank you so much for having me. Great questions.
Of
Sorry if
course.
I trailed off. I just asked my
No,
stupid
I
shit
I
out.
love that even more than just going down a list of questions. It's better that way. I
Yeah.
believe so.
Talking to me turns into kind of choose your own adventure sometimes because I'll just start trailing off, and then I'll have to stop myself and be like, wait a minute, what were we just talking about? Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So
That's where the stories are at. That's the good
that's true.
stuff.
That's true.
That's the good stuff. So, CK, I will just leave this off on see you next time.
All right, man. Sounds good, brother. Thanks for having me. Awesome job.